reply the way I want you to reply, then just don't ask me a question if you don't like my response. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Sure, Michael, you don't get to.
Do we not live in a democracy now? I mean, we talked a lot about a democracy tonight.
You don't get to just change the subject to avoid having to say something that might be perceived as negative about Donald Trump.
I did answer. I just didn't answer the way you wanted me to answer. You don't get to dictate my comments to my response on this show.
Your comments are not directed to the issue.
Yes, they were, because my response was the focus should be
some straight talk here, because you're not going to get it at this table, obviously. I think it is ridiculous that you are sitting here defending this. Sure, Michael, you just talked about with great arrogance that, no, this is not, are we seriously trying to say this is not a democracy? This is a dictatorship?
No, with arrogance.
Yes.
That's not, it wasn't with arrogance. What I said was that the president should be focused on X, Y, and Z things. Well, you didn't let me finish my point. You interrupted me because you didn't like my answer. I wasn't skirting the question. I gave an answer that you did not like. So you want to talk about arrogance? No, I think you're the one displaying arrogance.
Hold on a second. The question is it right or is it wrong? I feel like you should be able to express a view on that.
I wouldn't focus on this. I think there are more critical things that impact the country.
Okay, all right, we got to leave it there, Michael.
Hello, everybody. Guys, let's get right into this panel. Honestly, this is one of the most embarrassing ones I've seen yet. This is just pathetic. Take a look at this, and we'll talk about it.
This is pretty amazing that the executive order here, here's what it says about Chris Krebs. Krebs, through CISA, falsely and baselessly denied that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen. That is in a presidential executive order, almost as if Bigfoot was real. What is going on?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be with you. I think this is probably one of the most dangerous things that we've seen from him. We've seen a lot of craziness, but this is now taking the department and completely weaponizing against two people who just disagreed with him. One who told the truth and was involved as a witness in the congressional inquiry, and then somebody else who has said some things about him. The problem is we're back to now what he complained about throughout the campaign and his presidency, and that was that the Justice Department had somehow been weaponized. And now you see him essentially given a mandate and a directive by way of this presidential order to the department to move forward.
He signed 2 executive orders ordering investigations, weaponizing his Justice Department against people who just disagree with him. How do you justify that?
I mean, look, politically, you know, my advice to the president on this one would be continue to focus on strengthening the economy. You got to figure out a way to bring down cost. Keep doing what you're doing as it pertains to immigration. We need to increase chip manufacturing within the United States. There are several political things that I think that he needs to do.
All right, hold on.
Guys, sorry about that sound thing. That was on CNN's part, I promise. But it's only for a couple seconds.
Okay.
So
all right, Chair Michael, I get it. Yes, he should focus on the economy.
Yeah, he should.
But what do you think about the fact that he's targeting his political enemies, using executive orders and telling his Justice Department?
But we are focused on it, Chair Michael, and you just said, but Chair Michael,
can I answer?
But you haven't answered. But you have not answered.
I did answer. I just didn't answer the way you wanted me to answer. You don't get to dictate my comments to my response on this show.
But your comments are not directed to the issue.
Yes, they were, because my response was the focus should be.
Hang on a second.
About this not being an
Tiffany, 1 second.
Go ahead, Tiffany. Go ahead.
I mean, listen, Chair Michael, you're a friend of the show. You're my friend. Please answer the question.
I answered the question the way I want.
No,
nobody's going to dictate the way I answer questions on this show. You may not like the way I answered the question, but I gave an answer. No, I don't like that. We're not going to do dictating reply the way I want you to reply. Then just don't ask me a question if you don't like my response. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Sure, Michael, you don't get to.
Do we not live in a democracy now? I mean, we talked a lot about a democracy tonight.
You don't get to just change the subject to avoid having to say something that might be perceived as negative about Donald Trump.
That's what
it seems like. If you were a politician, a regular person on the street would say, well, that sounds like spin to me.
No, you asked a question.
Because it does sound like spin.
And my response to your question was, instead of doing this, the president should be focused on X, Y, and Z. That is an answer to the question.
When I said this is why.
Oh my God, he's so pathetic. Sure, Michael is so pathetic. He just can't. He just won't critique his daddy Trump. This is just so embarrassing. Look how animated he's getting. This is an obvious layup. This is obviously not okay. This is why those of us on the left call him a dictator or want to be dictator. And this is obvious meant to instill fear on currently people working for him and not speaking out against him whatsoever. He just can't critique the obvious because of fear from his spanking from his daddy. And let's be real, he doesn't want to be called a DEI hire, which is instantly exactly the kind of racist backlash he would receive from the base and Trump. The worst thing about it, and cynical, is that he knows it and still goes along with it. I expect this from Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings couldn't even answer if what Trump said about Haitians eating cats and dogs was racist. He just paused for 30 seconds. He just could not answer it and then threw a tantrum, just like Michael is right now. Think about the person you have to be okay with that, and helping and supporting people that are hurting your own people as we speak.
It's so dangerous, and this is an example of why it's so dangerous, and that is because nobody wants to speak out against it. You know, we've been waiting for Republicans, whether it be in Congress or wherever they are, to come up and actually say that we're not going to let Trump's power go unchecked. And when he does something wrong, something illegal, something outside the bounds of the history and the department, they sit quiet.
Is it illegal? Do you believe what he did is illegal?
Absolutely.
Why is it illegal?
If you read the Justice Department manual, one of the things it talks about, actually there's a whole section on whether or not the White House can have direction or communication for a prosecution. That's in there today. Frankly, I'm surprised they didn't scrub it yet, but it's actually in there. They're not allowed to do that. The reason is because you have to keep the department to be completely nonpartisan. That's the charging decision.
You don't think that the head of the executive branch can have law enforcement priorities?
I think when you call and say go after a political enemy, that's illegal and wrong. And I think the tide always turns and the pendulum swings here. When the Democrats are back in the White House, I imagine the Republicans are going to scream bloody murder if the Democratic president, calls the department and says, go after, let's go after the Trump kids and see what happens.
I mean, I'm curious, are you suggesting that you don't think that it's wrong to go after political enemies?
Here's what I think. I think the security clearance, let me just address the order.
I'm going to have to do the same thing I just did to Michael, in fairness to my friend over there. Because my question to you was, do you think that it is right or wrong to go after, for the president to use the Justice Department to go after his political enemies?
I think it is fine for the president to express law enforcement priorities. I think that the Department of Justice should exercise the same judgment that they would exercise on anyone else as it relates to whether someone should be criminally investigated. But here's what I believe about the order in total. The security clearances, fine. There's far too many people with security clearances. I don't have a problem when they take them away. Reviewing access and dissemination of information, perfectly fine, because we do know some oversteps occurred. Looking at whether the government was involved in censorship, which we know they were, perfectly fine. But
He's talking about censorship of his lie. He's
well, there
alleging.
Were other issues,
hold on,
issues
Scott.
related to COVID.
He is alleging that CISA censored his lie that the election was stolen. It is not true that the election was stolen. Chris Krebs told the truth, and now he's being targeted by the government with an executive order.
Right.
I guess it shouldn't be. I don't think it should be hard to just say, this is not what the government should be doing. This is not what the president should be doing, because if the shoe, to Michael's point, were on the other foot, as you claimed that it was, you thought that was a huge scandal.
Again, I think I think the president should be able to express his views about these issues, but I think the Department of Justice ought to exercise the same judgment that it would use on any other kind of investigation. Now, what these guys did and whether it deserves a criminal investigation, I don't know. You're a lawyer, I'm not, but I do know this, that like in the case of Miles Taylor, was working in the government anonymously, obviously disseminating information publicly that he should not have been doing.
Like what?
Well, I mean, he was anonymously writing pieces for the New York Times and stating publicly that he was trying to undermine the government of the United States that he was supposedly working for.
What did he disseminate that he was legally not allowed to disseminate?
Great thing to find out. He was a high-ranking position at the Department of Homeland Security.
He wrote an op-ed.
What did he have access to?
He wrote an
I don't know.
op-ed.
What did he disseminate to people you don't know about?
He wrote an op-ed and he wrote a book. So what's the allegation?
I think anybody who held a high-ranking position in a Homeland Security department like he did, we know what they did publicly. I'd love to know what he did privately.
They're not allowed to talk about their experiences when they leave government. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm saying that he clearly used his position to try to undermine the sitting president of the United States when he had it. I know what he did publicly now. I don't know what he did privately.
Okay,
I think it's worthy of investigation.
Can I just get some straight?
This is, and it's exactly like the guy with the glasses said. Trump is dangerous because of people like Michael and Scott Jennings. These Republicans are just spineless. They can be controlled so easily by just a few tweets by the president, a few little mean tweets by them. These people lose all respect to me and all legitimacy when you just refuse to point out the obvious. Anna Navarro has been a lifelong Republican. The only reason she doesn't vote Republican now is because of Donald Trump. And principle-wise, me and her probably disagree on just about almost every policy. But at least she has principles. At least she has some self-respect. It's hard for me to take you serious when you just can't even point out the obvious. But these are alpha men, right? It's always projection with them. They just wish and wish they could be alphas. That's why they always obsess over it. But when given the opportunity, they tuck their tails, run and hide, and have a tantrum when cornered. And that's why Abby has to talk to these two idiots, because they're like children. Just answer the question. It's so revealing of the cowardice when you squirm and dodge that way, especially Michael. Just very revealing of your principles or your validity.
Talk here because you're not going to get it at this table, obviously. I think it is ridiculous that you are sitting here defending this. Michael, you just talked about with great arrogance that no, this is not. Are we seriously trying to say this is not a democracy? This is a dictatorship.
No, with arrogance.
Yes,
that's not. It wasn't with arrogance. What I said was that the president should be focused on X, Y, and Z things. Well, you didn't let me finish my point. You interrupted me because you didn't like my answers. I wasn't skirting the question. I gave an answer that you did not like. So you want to talk about arrogance? No, I think you're the one displaying arrogance.
Hold on a second.
The fact that we are even debating whether or not this is right or not shows how broken this discourse is, Michael, respectfully. And you're a friend, so I'm saying this respectfully.
I'm listening to you, Tiffany.
But respectfully, Michael, this is absolutely what dictators do. And the fact that we are presenting this like it's an opinion. No, we can factually state that the President of the United States is using the Oval Office as a bully pulpit to beat his chest and strike revenge on people he perceives as his enemy. Miles Taylor was actually a survivor of Havana syndrome. He was one of the people who, got ill, and we still don't know who was behind Havana syndrome, but he was actually serving his country. He said something that the president did not like. He was critical of him, and now this president is threatening him with legal action.
I got to let Michael have a couple seconds to respond.
Tiffany, just quickly.
Yes.
Would you not be in agreement that the president should govern and focus on the issues that make a difference for the people in this country?
Obviously.
That was my answer. Why is that a problematic answer?
Because why can you not say that went right? Abby did not say, Michael, should the president govern? She said, is it appropriate for this president to be targeting his political enemies?
If a political leader is operating in such a way that I believe is a distraction from the aims of their political objectives, then I think I have every right to say I would focus on these things versus this.
We really got to go here, but Michael, I guess my question is, there's a difference between, is this a distraction or not, and is it right, is it wrong, is it legal, is it not? You're not a lawyer, so for you, the question is it right or is it wrong? I feel like you should be able to express a view on that.
I wouldn't focus on this. I think there are more critical things that impact the country.
Okay, all right, we got to leave it there. Michael, thank you. We got to leave it there.
Criticizing Joe Biden, and never was there any fear that Joe Biden would come after you. I spent years criticizing Barack Obama. Not one day did I have fear that Barack Obama would weaponize the Department of Justice against me. What Donald Trump is doing is instilling fear in all of America so that there is no criticism, not from the media, not from the corporate moguls, not from people on TV, not from people who work for him.
All right, we got to go. Michael Moore, we have to go. Michael Moore, thank you very much. Everyone else, thank you.
Oh my God! You see, Michael at the end there. He said, "Then what counts as criticism?" Throwing a little fake fit there, again, and playing the victim. A typical Republican playbook. They're always the victim. Imagine if Sure Michael fought back against Trump and the disgusting things he says and the behavior and things like this. The way he fights back against Abby and Tiffany. Abby Phillip and Tiffany Cross. I'm sorry, but what they're not telling you, and what's very clear to me, is they're calling you a coward. And at different points, you can hear the passion in Tiffany's voice. And certain moments, if you have to rewatch it, of Abby's face of just disappointment. I bet deep, inside, they felt ashamed of you. And let me just say one more thing. Hopefully, Sure Michael will hear this one day. Keep supporting this racist and the Republican Party that stands by its racism and is doing everything they can to make life harder for people that look like you, removing accomplishments, blaming things on DEI hires and using it as a slur. You let this get too far. And even you, who's doing all this bootlicking, will not be spared by them. You understand what I'm saying here? But I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments. I think that was just embarrassing. Just the worst segment I've seen Sure Michael in. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please subscribe if you're not. It really helps the channel. And I'll catch you in the next one.